Rachel Oates on the 1st of October, 2020.
These kinds of people who think it's worse to be called transphobic than it is to do anything transphobic, or that it's worse to be called a misogynist than it is to say misogynistic things. Like, it's ridiculous. It's not. Just be a good person and you won't be called these things.
Rachel Oates on the 5th of April, 2022.
Quote, "So quick update. I filed a defamation claim against EOT's video and YouTube agreed with me that it is in violation of the UK's defamation laws and so have restricted it from being played in the UK. The big claims in their video, that I'm a serial transphobe, are utterly false and are said with the intent of damaging my reputation." End quote.
It's ridiculous. It's not. Just be a good person and you won't be called these things.
I have been sitting on that video for well over a year now, as our mirrored copy will attest. And it is just one piece of evidence out of many that Rachel Oates wants to ban you from seeing. Why? Well, because it draws into question her own actions, a fact we'll discuss in further detail in a second. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transphobia, racism, anti-Semitism, and threats of sexual violence. If you like our work and appreciate the research put into each video, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon. You can also support us by liking, commenting, and sharing this video on social media. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and today I'll be updating you about what's been happening in the background, as well as how we'll be proceeding regarding the whole Rachel Oates situation. Starting with a point regarding the opening section. No, not the hypocrisy in Oates telling someone to just stop being a bigot and that way they won't get called one, before going on to file a defamation claim against me for labelling her actions as I, a trans person, see fit. That speaks for itself. I want to comment on the line that YouTube agreed with me that it is in violation of the UK's defamation laws. YouTube makes it explicitly clear that they cannot legally rule on whether a video has breached defamation law, with their exact words being that they are not, quote, in a position to adjudicate the truthfulness of postings, end quote. For the US, this means the claimant has to go to court to get an order to have the video taken down, yet in the UK they take a shoot first, ask questions later approach in line with the UK's draconic defamation laws, hence the block. Oates would have known this had she read the documents as she filed said claim, raising the question, why then did she frame this as YouTube agreed with me? Just something to think about. Nobody has ruled on anything, at least not legally. Also, let me see if I understand. When YouTube removes her video, as seen last year, they're wrong and dangerous. But when they block my video, that's definitive proof that I'm in the wrong. Oates herself acknowledges that YouTube makes bad decisions in relation to her work, yet she chooses to ignore that when presenting their decisions regarding my videos as the final word, clearly declaring them as an authority everyone should listen to when it's convenient for her. Thing is, I completely agree that it is dangerous for YouTube to remove videos exposing anti-masking. YouTube makes dangerous decisions all the time, including, I think, blocking our videos. The first one warned others about self-confessed serial rapist Lily Cade and her calls to lynch trans people, and the second included victim testimony regarding Rachel Oates. So Rachel Oates thinks YouTube was right to block victim testimony and information about sexual assault and hate speech. Not only that, but she was the one who told them to block it. Twice. Just like I've been wanting to point out for a while now. Sadly, we've hit a bit of an impasse, at least for now, regarding the two previous videos which were blocked in the UK, after Rachel Oates filed defamation claims back in April of 2022. Now, of course, we deny that there was any such defamation. In fact, we hold that there was a preponderance of evidence supplied, evidence that people can check for themselves if they so desire. Like, you can and should do that right now and make up your own mind, though if you're in the UK, you'll need to use a VPN to get around the aforementioned draconic defamation laws. Or you could just read the video script. That's another option. That's literally all I ask of people, for them to take a look at the evidence, particularly in the latter video. Why the latter video? Well, because I had to patch said video repeatedly as Oates continued to make numerous claims that were demonstrably false, such as her believing a reply to Lizzie Lang was actually a reply to her. I'd ask you to look at that and consider whether this, when coupled with the attempts to have the video removed, are the actions of an honest person. Oddly enough, one of the 3 videos we published around the time is still unaffected, likely because we didn't use a certain T-word. And that's acting as the whole foundation for this video, and the rest of the videos we'll be making going forward. That's right, we not only plan to make 1 video, not 2 or 3, but at least 4 videos, following on from this one, each one focusing on a specific element of Rachel Oates' behaviour. Because whilst I would have loved to have come back triumphant after our year-long back and forth with the powers that be at YouTube, there's not a whole lot we can do until we're back in the UK, which could take months or even years. That noted, I can't sit on this stuff for that long. Do you know how frustrating it was wanting to share just that one clip at the start of this video? I had a mirror of the livestream it was taken from uploaded before the last video went out in 2022. I'd thought about adding another patch, but decided against it, feeling like it'd already become too unwieldy, so I instead decided to give said clip its own prominent spot, which is what this video is doubling up as. Point is, I need to share my story to pull the knife out so that I can heal. I need closure, and this is the first step towards getting that. So, the first video will be going over the time Rachel Oates published screenshots taken from a private trans-focused mental health support group, screenshots which included a member's real name. We'll cover how Oates was quickly informed of this fact, yet opted to keep said screenshot up, a move that marks her actions to be indistinguishable from those if she had done so intentionally. A second video will then go over the time Rachel Oates published private emails sent to her by a now former trans member of her audience, with said member citing fears of growing anti-trans hostility among Oates' own audience to plead with her and try to get her to do something to stem the problem. Instead, she chose to publish said private emails and invite her followers to berate said trans person, all to send a very clear message to any other trans member of her audience, that their criticism, even in private, wouldn't be tolerated, that they're either all for her or they're against her. A third video will go over how Rachel Oates spent months mocking me for having her blocked and refusing to engage with her in general, only to do a 180 the moment I criticised her, weaponizing her tears as a white cis woman to silence criticism of her actions in a manner that marginalized people are sadly all too familiar with. The last video I have planned, although this is open to change, will cover Oates' promotion of far-right and anti-trans voices as feminist to her channel, as well as evidence that she was aware of said issue before deciding to do so. So there's a lot to get through. Though one thing I want to be clear about is that none of this is my attempt to get you to like me. You can think I'm a toxic bitch who you better 6 foot under and still acknowledge that Rachel Oates is wrong here. I'm not operating under some misguided notion that everyone around me has to like me and sing my praise, which, oddly enough, is a behaviour we'll be talking about throughout this series. I'm just someone who makes fully referenced videos specifically so people like yourself can check the claims I've made. Rachel Oates doesn't like that at all, because she isn't who she's pretending to be. Which brings us back around to the video at the start, specifically how Oates manages to simultaneously erase, and, in my professional opinion as a trans person, unfairly use trans people for her own gain. For you see, that clip at the start?
These kinds of people who think it's worse to be called transphobic than it is to do anything transphobic, or that it's worse to be called a misogynist than it is to say misogynistic things. Like, it's ridiculous. It's not. Just be a good person and you won't be called these things. Oh, God.
This isn't the only clip of interest. Mere minutes before Oates invoked transphobia as a talking point, she said this regarding what a woman can and cannot offer.
No, the only thing a man can provide me that a woman can't is a penis. Only thing.
This of course completely ignores the existence of non or pre-op trans women, that is, women who have penises. And this was rightfully called out by a member of Oates' own audience. And yet, while she replies to others throughout her stream, not once does she double back and apologise for what she just said. Instead, less than 2 minutes later, she brings up transphobia as her go-to example. This comes out of nowhere, by the way. Let's assume that this was just a coincidence, that she hadn't seen the comment remarking on trans women and had brought up the issue unprompted. All that tells us is that, deep down, Oates doesn't perceive trans women as women, or even the existence of trans people to be worthy of acknowledgement outside of making an argument to build her own brand, her own platform. If this is a coincidence rather than outright manipulation, it still demonstrates an unfair approach to the trans community, that we only exist as a talking point she can pay lip service to in order to profit off of. With that said, and I need to be absolutely clear that this is just me speculating, the cynic in me can't help but feel like she did see the comment. I feel like she just wanted to project the impression that she supports trans people to alleviate any concerns members of her audience might have had without drawing further attention to the issue. Because the mere suggestion that she has unconscious biases, prejudices she needs to work on and tackle, is just too much. The mere idea that she isn't perfect on these issues needs to be stamped out, something that will be a recurring theme throughout this series. A case that isn't exactly helped in how Rachel Oates takes time towards the start of her livestream to downplay J.K. Rowling's history of targeting trans people, labelling said abuse as problematic, a word that is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Lots of discussion about J.K. Rowling. That's a great point though. I guess it depends on where you draw the line in separating the art from the artist. That's something we've spoken about a little bit before and I'd like to kind of touch on more on my channel. Because I do think while her statements on Twitter, for example, and her other statements about trans issues are incredibly problematic, that doesn't necessarily influence her work on books like Harry Potter. However, if her transphobic views are now, I guess, being integrated into her other works of fiction, like it potentially is with this new book, that is a problem. And in that case, the art isn't really separate from the artist. And if you have a problem with one, you kind of have a problem with both. But that doesn't necessarily mean it affects how you should feel about her earlier work. Does that make sense? I don't know, there's a whole thing. I do kind of want to try and think about it a bit more and develop my thoughts a bit more and hopefully just come up with something. I don't know.
Just to clear one thing up, this was streamed in October of 2020. J.K. Rowling published her anti-trans manifesto attacking our community as a whole in June of 2020. I remember it because she did so during Pride Month, months before Rachel Oates sought to downplay said actions as problematic, an incredibly trivializing term for what she did. In her June manifesto, J.K. Rowling, on top of making the usual anti-trans arguments, labels one Magdalene Burns as, quote, an immensely brave young feminist, end quote. Who was Magdalene Burns? Well, aside from being a raging anti-trans bigot who compared the existence of trans women to blackface, she's someone who, for years, pushed the anti-Semitic conspiracy that a global order of Jewish billionaires are infecting young white girls with the delusion that they are trans. Burns, along with the current gender-critical movement, argue that said Jewish cabal is doing so as part of an attempt to decrease white fertility, aiding the Great Replacement, which is a white nationalist conspiracy. J.K. Rowling was openly glorifying someone promoting Nazi rhetoric, like literally what the Nazis said about the Berlin Institute of Sex Research prior the Second World War. Yet, even after all that, Oates still can't bring herself to label the anti-trans bigot transphobic. The closest we get is Oates labeling her views transphobic, in spite of Rowling's repeated history of showing us that it's not some glitch or middle-aged moment. She is a dedicated transphobe. This refusal to label anti-trans bigots transphobic, whilst being more than happy to label anti-women bigots misogynist, is a double standard, one that we see extensively throughout the events of 2019, in how no matter what Rationality Rules did, no matter how many times he told us what he was, cis people refuse to label him transphobic and even attack trans people for the perceived audacity of doing so themselves. But Ethel, she might not have known about J.K. Rowling's history. Okay, well, aside from the fact that this was all highly publicised and much talked about, if that is indeed the case and Oates had somehow managed to avoid all discussion on the topic for literal months, how does that make things any better? Oates chose to speak on an issue she hadn't done any research on, an issue that does not impact her life but has serious ramifications for trans people. All that does is once again show us how Oates has failed to engage with trans discourse. She hasn't talked to us, learned from us and understood our thoughts. She centered herself, a cis person, on the topic of trans rights, which I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not. If Rachel Oates didn't know about the June Manifesto, that had a noticeable impact on both the trans community and trans discourse, then that is more evidence of her misusing us as a talking point, a fancy bauble to make herself appear better to the casual onlooker without putting in any of the effort. She is, to put it bluntly, objectifying our struggle. This is just another example of ignorance not being a whole lot better than malice. There's also the issue of royalties from Harry Potter being funneled directly into anti-trans campaigns. Frankly, Rachel Oates has no right to excuse the consumption of Harry Potter in light of that fact. Again, nobody is forcing her to talk on the issue. She could have just said, hey, I'm not really comfortable speaking on this topic since I'm a white cis Gentile. Maybe ask the black, trans and Jewish communities how they feel about the whole trivialization of blackface and Nazi conspiracy stuff. And that would have been perfectly acceptable. What's worse, however, is that she shows us that she's completely capable of doing this in said live stream.
You can have an opinion saying, well, I prefer blue eyes to green. Or you can have an opinion saying, I prefer this body type to this body type. But you can't have an opinion saying, women shouldn't be allowed to do this with their birth control or uteruses or to make themselves feel better. If you can't understand the pain or the danger or the physical influence, consequence, whatever, don't have an opinion. It's like, I'm not going to sit here and tell him whether he should or should not be circumcised because I don't have a clue about what it's like to have a penis. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to have an argument. I'm not going to tell him what you should and shouldn't do because I don't have a penis. So he shouldn't tell women or people with uteruses what to do with their uteruses, you know?
She just doesn't treat trans people with the same respect. Instead, Oates opts to present the existence of a very real danger to the trans community, someone who has threatened numerous trans people into silence using the UK's draconic anti-defamation laws, all whilst funneling money into movements intended to undercut trans rights as some sort of logic puzzle she needs to personally unravel. You know, instead of just listening to the lived experiences of trans people who were, at the time, already suffering thanks to J.K. Rowling's mainstreaming of anti-trans rhetoric in the UK. As for her new book, possibly being anti-trans, again, this shows how Rachel Oates has refused to listen to trans people, yet still wants to engage with our discourse. Something that was widely discussed in the trans community from June of 2020 all the way through to September and beyond was the fact that Rowling's 2014 book of the same series, The Silkworm, had its protagonist threaten a trans woman with rape, telling her that, quote, "If you go for that door one more time, I'm calling the police and I'll testify and be glad to watch you go down for attempted murder. And it won't be fun for you, Pippa," he added. "Not pre-op." End quote. This is Rowling's protagonist, the hero of the story, threatening a trans woman with rape in prison, a fact that was widely discussed in the trans community, one Rachel Oates would have known had she actually engaged with said community. Instead, all we get are the continuous qualifiers that her anti-trans views are potentially influencing her work, supplying the bigger and endless degree of doubt. That's before we come to the fact that Rowling's chosen pen name for said books, this is before they flopped, forcing her to come out and artificially boost sales using her influence, was Robert Galbraith. Not exactly a common name. That's why it's worrying to discover that Robert Galbraith Heath was a pioneer of using deep brain stimulation, read electrodes in the brain, to cure gay people of being gay. No editor on this planet would have let Rowling choose a pen name without doing background research and double checking to make sure she wants to use said name with its historical connotations. This was a conscious choice on Rowling's part. And all of this information was made available by trans people had Oates actually wanted to listen, rather than, once again, centering herself and then friend Gabbie Hanna, another cis woman.
I'd love a reaction to J.K. Rowling's book if you have the time and strength. Oh, is this the new one with the character? Ooh, alright. Yeah. So actually, me and my friend Gabbie were talking about this the other night, over wine, of course, and food, because she, like, her main area of kind of expertise is, like, gender and stuff. She has a PhD in, her doctorate was something to do with drag culture in Leeds, like, interesting stuff, and she's a wonderful, intelligent, smart, amazing woman. And Gabbie's actually my oldest friend, and so me and her were discussing this whole J.K. Rowling thing the other night, and I think it'd be great to actually see if Gabbie would be up for coming on my channel and talking about this with me, because as well as specialising in gender stuff, she actually, as a kind of hobby in her spare time, is a young adult fiction writer. So, author, gender expert, I think she would be an amazing person to talk about this stuff with. So if she's up for it, I would love to try and get her thoughts on a video and talk about that kind of thing after we've both read the book and stuff. So, yeah.
No suggestion to involve a trans person regarding, anti-trans narratives? Oates doesn't see us as people. She never has. We're either trinkets to be exploited or barriers to be destroyed without mercy. I'm sadly not allowed to give my honest opinion on what all of this says about Oates' character, since she has decided to utilise the very same draconic system as J.K. Rowling to stop me from doing so. All I can do is show you the evidence and lead you to ask yourself whether these actions could constitute transmisia, to keep the conversation alive long enough that hopefully more people take a look. So what do you think? How do you feel about cis people deciding what is and is not transmisic? What do you think about Oates' comments on Rowling's book and manifesto? How do you want cis people to respond to being told that they're transmisic? Did I show you anything that surprised you? Have you changed your mind about anything after watching this video? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know down below. And to Rachel Oates, in the slim likelihood that you're watching this or are looking down at the comments, remember.
Just be a good person and you won't be called these things.
As for the rest of you, hopefully the videos going forward won't be hit with a block, yet just know that if they are, VPNs are a way to see the evidence for yourself. So spread the word. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help out, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make our work possible. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Gert Van Vorst, Hannah Banghart, Marble Wings, Sosh Daniels, Flynn, Darnit Dante, and Higgins the Seagull. And for myself, Adita, and Levi, take care now.